So the idea of this panel is to discuss with the community ideas in a very open fashion. It's like having a core team meeting discussion open to the community on different ways that we can grow the language in the future. When I mean the future, I mean no time promises, right? Nothing of this will be recorded. No, they will be recorded. But yes, the idea is simply to have some relaxed time with the community to share ideas. He will be the moderator, by the way. He's Martin Bersili, ex-core team member, and also Mana CTO. It's a pleasure to have him with us, to me at least.
Yeah, I'll be reading questions as they come. We have a couple of points that Brian Cardiff left for us. He can't attend now. So his first point is...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. Why? Yeah.
Let's go around.
Yeah, I just had a talk earlier, but my name is Johannes Müller, also known as Straight Shooter on the GitHub and other places. Yeah, I'm one of the core members of Crystal, and I work at Manas full-time on Crystal.
I think I presented myself already. So I'm leading the development of Crystal and Beta Ciliani, and please pass it on.
I'm George Dijik. I'm a core team member that mainly focuses on community moderation on the forums and Discord. If you frequent those, you'll probably know who I am or interact with me at some point. And if you need any help, we're happy to help.
Hi, my name's Stephanie. I'm a former core team member, mostly active, say 2 to 3, maybe 3 or more years ago. It's been a while since I've been active in the Crystal community, but I'm here, and yeah, I'm excited to discuss.
Hello. Yeah, I am Oleg Brepin, core team member of Crystal, contributing in my free time. Mostly over the years in the past, but now also still a little bit.
Okay. Well, thanks for the introductions.
I would like to add, sorry. The idea is that anyone in the community can ask questions about what you would like us to discuss. So we have a starting questions to start, but you can think your own and take the mic or write on the different places.
Yeah. We just got the first one from Kevin. Kevin asks, there's been talks about incremental compilation in the past and how it's not likely to happen anytime soon. Is there any plans or thoughts on how the feedback cycle can be improved, if not through incremental compilation?
Who want to take this hot potato?
I mean, there's always the possibility to just improve the compiler as it currently works. Like we've been doing some work on that. I think especially Ari has been proposing ideas and tried some implementation, some worked, some not that well. So we might need to work on that and improve stuff. But there's definitely I think quite some room for improvement to improve the compiler's architecture and how it uses resources and to make that faster, just how it is.
I would like to add that I always mention this, that one of the turnarounds that you have as a developer is also on the type checking process, that you change something and you want to see the error coming at you fast. This is a different process that I think we might tackle from a different form. This requires research, of course. And Crystal is a unique language in the way it's built. And I think we need to do more research. This is something that Ari started. Probably the forum discussion started from there. We need to take it from there and see where it leads.
Yeah, I think in general this is a question towards compiler interactivity and interactivity during the development process. There's many different ways to approach this: incremental compilation, speeding up compilation, parallel compilation, and perhaps making changes to the language to enable these features. And yeah, so it's a topic of research, and I think, even back in 2018, before 1.0, this was a big topic of discussion on the core team. It's something we've always had in mind, but it's been difficult to address. It's a very complex problem, and we're kind of always working out how we want to approach this. And I think some changes in the future will be geared towards enabling this. Yeah.
Should I just talk? Yeah. Question on the, follow-on question on that. Because I think, Peter, what you said about like quick feedback when you're developing is like, that's the key thing. I think the time it takes to do a release build is a totally separate kind of problem and much less of an issue day to day. Has there been any attempt of like a long-running compiler which is able to like watch the file changes or anything like that?
I say that I'm looking at what Brian has been discussing today very closely. Because I think that's where we might get an answer.
Do we want to repeat questions for the YouTube?
Sorry. So the question was about if there is consideration on the feedback loop to the developer, if there is consideration of a long-running compiler. So a compiler that you can interactively talk to get a faster feedback.
Yeah, I think that topic of a long-running compiler is very close to the topic of incremental compilation. I think if the algorithms are very similar towards a compiler which stays in the background and is faster than running a Crystal build, would require some incrementality in the same way that running the compiler twice and it being faster the second time.
There's a question from David at Discord. He's asking about IDE support and expressing some struggles with crystalline, particularly slow response times, which would be kind of related to compilation times. Yeah. I don't know if
I think the answer is the same.
Okay, cool. Then we have another question from Kevin. There's a couple of longer questions I will process. Would it be too hard to formalize a grammar for Crystal? As the maintainer for the Sublime text package, I'd love that.
That makes a lot of sense, and I feel your pain. So we need to work on that. Let me add it to the to-do list. No, but it's right. We need to do that. We definitely need to do that.
And of course, that's the language researcher speaking there. I mean, sure, it makes sense, but like from a practical point of view, I'm not sure if it's that valuable to the language. I would at least question that, because like at this moment, it's the grammar is probably relatively stable. There might be some additions in the future, maybe, but there's not going to be so much change. So I hope at least. And then everything that works right now with the current grammar rules, as long as you have them discovered, it shouldn't change that much, I suppose.
I have noticed that there is definitely an issue whenever someone wants to implement support for a particular text editor. There are like 5 separate sets of, for example, keywords, just what the keyword is. Everyone just starts to discover for themselves, get from an existing list, oh nope, that one is missing this. And there's the part that different keywords only kick in particular contexts, and in other contexts there are not reserved words. So I do think there is value for those kinds of external tools to have something to look at, reference against, maybe test against, so that the formalized grammar would be great for that.
Kind of related to that question.
Can you just give the microphone?
All right, sure. Has to be the other one.
I maybe struggle.
All right.
I guess related to that question is the tree sitter grammar for Crystal. I don't think anyone is stable at the moment, but lots of interesting tooling is coming out around diffing and editors which uses tree sitter, and yeah, might be nice to work on.
CSet Code asks in Discord, are there any languages that you think are doing it well that we can learn and adopt into the Crystal community? Things like tooling from Flutter, Dart, education, etc. So he's mostly asking about inspiration.
I can comment on that. Dart is definitely doing things well, and it's a surprisingly similar language in terms of the feeling. But the thing is, they have a lot more people working on it, and Crystal would just need to prioritize things to keep the main things working, the language features. But yeah, it has a lot of Dart has a lot of tooling for analyzing, finding bad patterns. It does have a persistent language server, which may be like a good area to research from, learn from. But yeah, we might not have the necessary contributors for that. Actually, any contributor might learn from that and contribute something.
In terms of, inspiration from other languages in general, I think, me personally, excuse me. When I used to contribute to Crystal more, I was mainly contributing to the standard library, and I've always, when I was researching new features, reviewing proposals, I would have a look at what other languages did. Syntax as well, when a syntax is coming along, you always have a look at other languages. What have they done to solve this problem? What are the benefits? What are the cons? And so as language designers, we're always looking at other languages, trying to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it. So it's hard to kind of pick out individual languages, but we've always had this understanding of what's going on around us in the programming language community and trying to, incorporate the lessons being learned around us. And as a follow-on to language servers specifically, one of the things that I've learned during Crystal development is writing a language server is very different from writing a compiler. Language servers are very much harder to write than a server because you need to make something that can understand half-written code. When you're writing a language server, the language server can't break unless you have perfect... The language server can't break if you don't have perfectly typed, perfectly matching braces everywhere code. The language server needs to understand code which is half-written and continue to suggest valid things from that. And that's very different from a compiler where you're trying to throw up errors as soon as you can. So the code base between a compiler and a language server is quite different. The way they, excuse me, the way they pass the code, the way they handle errors is very different. So there's been quite a lot of problems having that in the Crystal community because it's essentially starting a whole new project, a whole new parser, a whole new front end for Crystal.
In regards to the tree sitter part of the tooling, in the Discord there was some community involvement in trying to create a tree sitter. However, I don't think that is public yet. The people that were working on, I think there's like 2 people that are working on it. It's like a community, their own like prerogative, but they, while in development, the project is like in a closed source state. So maybe in the next like few months, couple months, or whenever they have the time to work on it, we might hear more about that, and it could be something that could have future potential.
All right. Mr. D from Discord is asking, what are your biggest challenges at the moment? That's a nice open question.
No, this has a very easy answer. Financial. Now, of course, getting
The monies.
Getting more people to fully contribute to Crystal is important. In particular, to tackle this problem, right? These challenges that what we are mentioning now are our toughest challenges. Those require a lot of research. And yes, for that you need super devoted contributors, having a lot of free time, or funding.
Yeah, also I think to add on that, what's relevant to know is like Beta yesterday had in this presentation, like we have a couple of resources like working full-time on Crystal, like half a beta with some help, and I'm with my head and without my head, and so we have some availability here, but there's really a lot that goes into just maintaining Crystal. Like we're not constantly just working on new features and not just constantly working on improving code or fixing bugs, and that there's a lot that goes around that, just like community management, maintaining build systems, deploying stuff, and yeah, everything like doing releases and making sure that all the pipelines, everything works. So we actually do a lot that's not language development. It's really, heavy parts that just, I would say, clock down a bit, like the development, because you wouldn't expect that much work to do outside of the work that you actually would like to do. So any contributions are super helpful for the language.
Done? Okay. Also from Mr. D, do you have any suggestions on specific things that community members can help out with, other than money, I guess?
Well, I mean, ambassadors are a good example, and we have Guto yesterday explaining all the many things that he did to spread the word about Crystal. And that's already important because that helps us reach developers from companies, and then those companies might become sponsors later or contributors of code. So I would say spreading the word is one of the best helps you can do. And that can mean writing blog posts, giving talks at conferences, and has many forms. That's a great help. And of course, fixing bugs and all this also helps. Sending codes, sending PRs. The only issue there is that PRs are reviewed by the core team, which from the moment, for the things that I mentioned yesterday, that means mainly from the paid part of the core team members, because we are the one who can give the time to review. And our PRs, as you probably know, pile up a bit. And our response time to PR reviewing is slow. So this is why it's problematic to say you can contribute code, because, well, at some point we might look at it. So yeah, anyone want to contribute reviews?
Yeah, in regards to submitting code, obviously, I think this is stated on the repo, but if you're submitting code, if it's a bug or fix, if it's documentation, just submit it. If it's a new feature, a new refactor, you might want to submit an issue saying, I'm having this problem, this is the way I want to go about solving it, and kind of leave a bit of time for other people to have a bit of design review before you go off and start implementing things. Because getting a fully formed pull request, beautifully documented, beautifully coded, but you think, oh, I would have implemented that a little differently. I'm not sure this plays well with this other feature that you perhaps didn't think about, is quite not perhaps frustrating, but it's a little draining as a maintainer, because you think, I really appreciate your contribution, but I'm going to have to tell you to rewrite this code, which is not the best experience for you. It doesn't make me happy. It doesn't make these people happy. So, you know, a bit of collaboration with the design before you go off and write 2,000 lines of code is a fantastic thing.
All right. Davide asks, looking back a few years, what would you do differently in the language?
No ideas. It's perfect.
I'm surprised there's silence here.
I can actually talk about this a bit. I think one thing I found interesting is I've been contributing in various ways to Crystal for 3 or 4 years. And at the beginning, there were some quite major changes to the language before 1.0. And there was quite a bit of discussion in the community whether, you know, changing these things is going to change the language fundamentally, drive developers away, or bring new ones, or... But I didn't quite agree with all of the changes that happened to Crystal before 1.0. But I think, looking back now, I think almost all of the choices that were made, all of the changes, all the breaking changes before 1.0 were largely a good thing. So I think what I want to say is having this kind of breadth of discussion, and there's quite a lot of disagreement among the core team, and that's really made the language so much stronger by having a couple of people at Manas, but still incorporating quite a lot of feedback from outside Manas and making sure that we're having a diverse set of opinions to make the language perfect. And I'm really happy with the language, and I don't really have much that I regret because of this broad set of opinions that we all have.
Yeah, I would agree on that. That Crystal is a great place, I think. So technically, I wouldn't need to do anything differently. Still, one could wonder, what could have gone different. And I personally would have liked maybe some things be different. I think also that 1.0 was a major milestone there, because that kind of cemented us into a backwards compatibility, and now it's harder to move stuff or remove or change or whatever. One point, maybe at least I personally think that maybe some parts from the standard library should have been removed or marked as experimental before 1.0, so we wouldn't have to drag them along, or could be easier about enhancing them individually. I don't know, just a random example is the complex class. I think that's pretty okay implementation-wise, but it's also something that very few people probably actually use, because it's a very specific computational feature, and it would be very well off in a shard, I would say. It doesn't need to be in standard libraries, but we have it, and so we have to maintain it.
Though, kind of adding to that, if we had made all the changes to the standard library we wanted to before 1.0, I think we would be on 0.99 or something.
I was going to make the same comment.
Yeah, I was also going to make a similar comment. Mainly the things I wish would be different are things that would have to be changed before 1.0, but that could have been going on, and we need to change this thing and this thing. And there's also the part, if we did change a lot of things before 1.0, that might have been too much of a breakage, even regardless that it's not 1.0. Just break everything and then go for 1.0, that's also not good. So the decision had to be made at some point. Yeah, so not that much to change. These things are kind of hypothetical. And improvements for the future, they can still happen. So yeah, nothing much.
I want to make a little comment. There was a language that I will not comment on the name, whose first stable version of the standard library was so, and it was a language from a big company. So I think we are much better than them at that point. So I'm quite proud of what we achieved in 1.0.
How are we on time? Because it's 4:30. Are we going through 5 or? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Just had to check. Kevin asks, I attended the first ever CrystalConf and now this one. Both great experiences. When can we expect the next one?
When someone else wants to organize it. Ideally, we would like to have yearly conferences or bi-yearly conferences. One of the things and one of the contributions that you can make, if you know people from other vaguely related conferences that might be able to host also CrystalConf, that can help us not only on the organizational, but also to bring communities together. For instance, of course, Ruby is one of the first that come to mind, but trying to combine with another conference will be best. And basically, if we find a good place where we can make the next one, we'll do it.
I think Martin has a question.
Sorry, another question. When I discovered Crystal, I think the type system was the thing that really drew me to it. And I think you've done a fantastic job, and thank you. Talking to you these last 2 days have been great, and I've discovered that there's a huge amount of interest as well in functional programming amongst the core team. And yet, we've had very little discussion, I think, about types in these 2 days. What do you think about that? And should we lean in to that and talk more about types or not?
Yeah, maybe to complement the question, that also related to a point that Brian Cardiff made before. He says that to improve parallelism is related to also introducing immutable data. The justification being knowing what data can be shared safely between workers and what not enforced by the compiler. So maybe we can merge both.
Why are you passing this to me?
Because you're looking at it.
I'm a functional programmer myself, and I'm afraid that I will derail this conversation too much, so please stop me. I have thoughts about it. There's one thing that is important to take into account. There is, when building a language, you have to make compromises on the features that you want to add and the simplicity that you want to maintain. So, for instance, Python is a language whose user base grew a lot because it was simple, right? When it started, 1.0, it was not simple, right? So even people that were not computer scientists could get it very easily. So it got this huge amount of people involved in Python and using Python and so on. And then Python started growing, and now Python is not the same Python that was in 1.0. There's a lot more to it. But the user base grow with it, in a sense. We can think the same about Crystal. We've been here for 10 years. We have a user base and we can grow. However, we don't have enough user base to think of adding features and thinking that the community will grow with us, because we still need to attract new users. And for that, we need to keep maintaining some simplicity to the language. That said, there are several ideas to improvements on the front of functional programming. Mutable data that Brian mentioned is a very good one. So today we have structs and values and references. Usually you use struct or class, so that's more familiar to you maybe. And structs, they are used by copy, right? So when you pass it around, the compiler will make the program will make a copy and pass it around the copy. But when you make an instance of a class, it will use the pointer instead. But the struct, the instance of a struct, will live in the stack. And this is the reason why you need to copy, because the stack grows and shrinks, so your objects will be removed. So you cannot pass the reference, because otherwise, when it's removed from the stack, it crashes. But actually, there are two distinctions there. One is whether you want to allocate the object, if in the heap or in the stack, and the other one is whether if you want it to be passed by value or by reference. So you can think of having 3 different categories instead, and have one that is by value, but you can put it in the heap. One is by value, but you can put it in the stack, and then you have the reference. This is an idea to play with, of course, But again, that's one more level of complexity to the language. And there's much more I can continue talking, but so probably we want one little thing. So I got attracted to Crystal because I'm a functional programmer, and I saw the type system, and I was like, wow, I can have the union types without having to have constructors, as in Haskell, if you know Haskell. You can very easily create objects of a union type, in a sense, and manipulate them. And this is fantastic. This gives you a lot of expressivity. And we are definitely not squeezing that enough. And I think we can also add some things to the standard library without complicating too much the language. This is something that I think we can start doing today, that will already give a more functional taste to the language to deal with union types in a more functional fashion.
Going back to talking more about functional programming, I think there's a lot to how a language presents itself to the community, to the world, to people who don't know more about the language. A lot of us are very familiar with functional programming, and although Crystal is fundamentally an object-oriented language, and although it's mostly known for Ruby developers, you can actually, sorry, did I say functional? Crystal is mostly an object-oriented language, and it's mostly known to Ruby developers, but you can do a lot of functional programming, do a lot of immutability in Crystal, and it's more about how we choose to communicate the language, how we choose to express to the community what our average Crystal developer is, how they write code. And a lot of it is also dictated by the community and shards. So if you want to see Crystal be more functional, I would say go write your shards in a more functional way. Use more immutability, use more functional paradigms, try and incorporate the way that you want to see Crystal be written when you write your code. Don't just, say, oh, Crystal is object-oriented. I have to write in an object-oriented way, because Crystal has all these tools like yield, blocks, all these really, really nice ways to express yourself, TSLs, macros, preferably less macros. But, go have fun. Don't feel like you're bound to be object-oriented because Crystal is known as an object-oriented language, or because Ruby is known as an object-oriented language. Just go out and play.
All right. Alexander asks if there's any roadmap of increasing Crystal popularity, maybe introducing it to popular platforms like LeetCode, HackerRank, or partnership with some big corporations.
So the partnership with big corporations is like, well, if you give me the number of, I don't know, the CEO of Google, pass it on. Regarding the other part, I think it's a great opportunity for the community to contribute to this popular platform that you mentioned. In terms of the team, as we mentioned, we don't have much time. Maintaining is already taking a lot of time. So we are devoting the spare time that we have, the time that we don't spend maintaining to grow the language. So this is something that the community, we encourage the community to create.
I think it's a related question by Kevin. The resources for getting started with Crystal are quite sparse. Is that something the community can help with? For instance, highlighting the exorcism track on website could make sense.
I would say one of the hard things to do as a core developer is really understand how new developers approach the language. So if you know someone who has recently come into Crystal, please question them on what they found difficult, what they would have liked as like documentation, as tools, as resources to learn the language, and try and get that information back to people who can make those changes, to people who can who can boost resources and can make them really obvious to newcomers. So, because it's really hard to kind of get in the mindset of someone who's new to the language as someone who's been working on it for, 4, 5, 7, maybe years.
All right, Kevin is on a roll. When do we think the interpreter will be part of the pre-built binaries?
Yeah, so the idea was to keep the interpreter away because it doesn't build properly on all platforms. And because it also has a couple of issues that still need to be somehow found out and fixed. But I suppose it wouldn't really hurt to enable it on more platforms. It's an experimental feature, that's for sure, and it can just work that way.
So I always have the idea of distributing in the Linux platform because this is where we know we can compile the interpreter. But for that, we need to change the way we build the binaries in a significantly different manner. Because right now we distribute a static file, a static binary. We have to move into a dynamic one. So we need to have the dependencies on the different operating systems and so on. So it's a bit of work.
I guess one option could also be to just, the compiler works with a statically linked library. It just doesn't allow you to link any libraries at runtime. So I figure many things that you do with the interpreter, you don't need that. Obviously it's a quite a limitation on what you can do with the interpreter, but you can do a lot of stuff without it. So maybe you could just enable it as is and say that, okay, this feature just doesn't work the way it is built and distributed. And that gives us more time to figure out how to do the shared dynamically linked distribution. Or there are some distribution mechanisms where you get a dynamically linked library, through Brew, for example. There, the interpreter works very well, and maybe it's also okay to have external channels for having the compiler distributed that way.
All right, Azure Mao from Discord asks if they can ask a question here as well. I can take that one. Yes, you can. Next one, Kevin. Ruby got pattern matching in Ruby 2.7. What's your thoughts on it, and would it make sense in Crystal?
This is about pattern matching.
Yeah.
In general, there are some forms of pattern matching in Crystal already. If you look at switch cases, that was something that was added before 1.0, I think, and was a very welcome change to the language. Pattern matching has been often a well-requested feature among people who come new to the language. And often our response is, well, Crystal has pattern matching already. Maybe not in the same way that you're used to in other languages, but it's useful to make sure that the way Crystal does pattern matching is where it fits into the language, and it doesn't mean that when we add pattern matching, there's two different ways to do certain things, and there's a little bit of, oh, you should use pattern matching, or some developers are not using pattern matching. Right now, there's, as I said, there's pattern matching case, but there's also, if you think about method argument, like arguments to functions and putting type restrictions on them, that's a form of pattern matching as well. So as the core team, we want to limit, we don't want to add every new feature that someone wants to the language, because otherwise the language becomes messy, there's too many features, it becomes harder to learn. And so we want to find a case where pattern matching really helps make something that was hard now simple. And we haven't quite found any cases where the existing pattern matching capabilities of Crystal don't already cover these use cases. So if you have something that would really, a way to, if you have an example that would really, really benefit from using new syntax, please come to us. Tell us, like, oh, I think there should be some new syntax to do this in this way because this is quite difficult. But we haven't seen any of those that are really kind of groundbreaking for pattern matching so far that we haven't already added.
Just a little comment addition on that. Probably it's related to the adding functional programming taste to Crystal, of course. And I think if we use more the type system to have more functional taste to it, then it will become a useful addition in a sense. I've been thinking on this problem, and I've been thinking of a simple idea of, so right now you can case on types, right? But you cannot say case on a type and then add a condition. Like, if it's a string and the string is hello, right? Do this. Maybe adding a basic form of that, just a little predicate on top of the type analysis, might not be that hard and might still be very useful. But this is just research in a sense. So we need to still investigate this.
Beta was just commenting that you can't exactly add a predicate to something that is already written in a case statement. However, you can just use if statements or if expressions, in fact. Just write something as an if expression. Things inside it are even narrowed by type, so you get the type safety benefits. In the end, it will be a bit more verbose, but you can still get most of the feeling of pattern matching already with the features that we have.
And always remember when you're using case that you can leave off the variable at the top of case, and you can use a switch case statement in Crystal. In each when block, you can just write it as if it was an if statement, and that works.
Okay, there are no more questions coming in from Discord or YouTube. Any questions in the room? We have still 10 minutes. Any questions from the team? Let's see. Yeah, it's a bit tricky to reply this in panel, I think, but we can give it a try. There's a proposal from Alexander to set up same thread in spawn function to false by default. He argues that it will give a developer much more control of a fiber than if it's spawned in a separate thread. And also all existing charts wouldn't be affected by turning on multi-threading. That's, anyone wants to comment on that?
I'm not sure if I really understand what gives more control if you just change the default value from one to the other, because either way, if you want something else than the default, you have to choose that explicitly. So I would say it's the same level of control. Maybe in some applications you may prefer the one or you may prefer the other. But yeah, I think in general it's important to know that all the multi-threading story is still very experimental, and we don't really have fully played out how it will end up. So I mean, we could do a change here, but it's only affecting an experimental preview feature, and maybe we'll want to have something else entirely once we look more deeply into it. So at this point, I think it's probably not that worth changing it. We'll need to look at the whole picture of multi-threading, how to bring that into a more usable state. And then we can talk more about which defaults are good for what. One note also that I mean, spawn is a very, I would say, low-level feature. So it's the basics of how concurrency works, because it's just creates a fiber instance and queues that. You can build more complex stuff on top of spawn, which could be more tailored to specific applications, specific environments, with then an override of the default features.
I think there's room in the standard library for more concurrency primitives. I think that's something we among the core team agree on. We'd love to spend some time. If you want it, pay them.
Okay, another proposal is some alternative. I don't know how I'm going to read this, but some alternative to Python's if def equals main, which means some ability to know if the current file is required already by another module, or whether it is an entry point of an executable. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think there had been a discussion somewhere on that. I don't recall it fully, but I think I responded something like, should be doable, but it might not be that worthy for many things, but maybe it is. I don't know, like your concrete use case, but I could imagine that there are some. I suppose, yeah, we could like expose in probably the way I would do it is have a constant that exposes like the files that are directly mentioned to the compiler to start looking at. But it can be multiple ones though, so you don't have only one explicit entry point necessarily.
I think there's a discussion to be had about good coding practices, and do you want a file to be required? Sometimes it's the entry point to a program, and sometimes you require this file and it's providing a library. I think the way that you, the fact that you can't get this information in Crystal right now is perhaps a benefit, because it forces you to separate say, if you compile this file as your top-level file, you're getting a command line tool, this specific command line tool, and that file is then not a library. I think having this separation between files, this file implements the command line tool, and this file is meant to be required. I think that's probably a good thing. And as language developers, we always have to think about, when we're adding a feature, how will this affect how users write code? And, well, sometimes the answer is not to give users more power.
Martin?
Very quick question. What are you most looking forward to about Crystal 2.0?
In 3 minutes.
This is not a simple question, man. The question was what we're expecting in 2.0. No, I don't think we have time for answering this. Do we?
One thing.
I don't know how strict are we with the room. That's my fear. No? We can go with the time?
Don't need to be on the spot. Yeah.
All right. Why did you give me the mic to me? You said like... well, many of the things that we discuss here are good examples, like things about functional programming and pattern matching and all this stuff. Again, thinking on how much do we want to complicate the language or not. There is something that it is important, I think, that we have some flags, for instance, in the compiler today to maintain backward compatibility. Actually, to break backward compatibility. For instance, the overloading, the method of overloading has some problems that were fixed, but that will introduce breaking changes. Therefore, we put that into a flag, a compiler flag. The idea is that those should go in a 2.0 version. Improving overloading is a very good one that we definitely want. Then there's tons of features, but this is more about having the time to develop them, and they can even be part of 1.0 or 1.x. Like having different garbage collectors is something that we like to have because that will give you alternatives to performance. Because the garbage collector is one of big chunk of time-consuming operations in Crystal and memory allocation in general. And having more research on that is something very interesting. Whether that lands in 2.0 or not, but it's more a matter of time.
I think if we're getting on to the big number 2, I think the question to start with, talking about Crystal 2.0, is what are our goals? If we want a list of what do we want out of 2.0, how do we prioritize these? How many of these can we take? How many can we possibly, big problems can we leave till later? Do we need to prioritize the ones that actually, need breaking changes, as opposed to ones we can lay some groundwork for, but not actually implement for 2.0. And secondly, whoops, I forgot. Someone else.
For 2.0, I think there are lots of things that are like kind of in the pipeline that we know need or could really use some improvement, and where it's not clear if they can be implemented in a way that's backward compatible or not. So the first thing we would need to do, which I would hope for that, is to even figure out like what is necessary. Like, for example, generics. We know there are a couple of issues with that, and a couple of features that we would like, and it needs lots of research still at this point to figure out how to do it and how we can put that on top of the existing rules.
There's one more from Discord. Sudelmau asks, will Crystal ever get a safer reference type like in C++? Like in C++.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that type. I'm not sure.
No,
are
any
of us familiar with that type? You know, safer reference? Then I think it's a topic of research. We can have a look at, if you come on the forum, perhaps, you know, write a little post about what are the advantages of this approach, what C++ is doing, and sort of explain this type, how you envisage it being used in Crystal. That would kind of be a good start for discussing this, as opposed to a panel where we don't really have an understanding of the background of this topic.
All right. There's one user typing. Chocolate 42. Okay. No. Okay. I think we are good. It's time. Thanks so much for all your questions, those who are remote and those who are in the room. Do you want to say any closing words?
Definitely. I want to thank the community again for being so wonderful. And these 2 days really have been a lot of fun to me, hopefully for you too. I also would like to thank the host of the place, but they're not here. They did a tremendous job. I would like to thank Johannes, our AV personnel. He did a tremendous work. He brought all of this equipment that you cannot see, sorry, but is this gigantic suitcase that is very heavy. It broke one of the wheels. So yeah, thank you for the great job. I would like to thank the core team members present for being here, for participating in this panel. I think your contribution was great. To the ambassadors for their work, spreading the word of Crystal, to the sponsors for making all of this possible. Anyway, I don't, yeah, I'm going to cry.
I want to add, I think we haven't mentioned that there were more people involved with preparing the conference. Mekla definitely. Then we had Lorenzo and Jack, who were preparing with us together the conference. They can't be here in person, but thanks for your help. Lorenzo did a great job with preparing the speakers. Yeah, Mekla did lots of work for the conference. That's awesome. And of course, Peter, thank you for being a great leader in all of this. And yeah, it was a pleasure to be here with all of you.
And let's get some beers.